Hey, welcome to Dishing on Divorce. I am your host, Lisa Lisser, founder of LZL Coaching, a boutique coaching firm focused on divorce, relationships, life transition, and family conflict coaching. I wear lots of hats, just like all of you. In addition to coaching, I'm a spiritual counselor and a Jewish educator. I'm also a lapsed lawyer and a divorced mom of 3 kids in their 20s. I know the experience of divorce firsthand because I live it. I still live it. And I do this work because I understand the fear, I understand the overwhelm, and I know that you need help in ways that are hard to find. I'm here to be your guide on the side, the one who's there to listen when you feel like no one really hears you, the one who helps you get through each day when you feel like you can't get out of bed, and the one who's there to open your eyes to possibilities for abundance when you can't even imagine it. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it's hard to see abundance when you're living on half of what you had before. But when you start to experience what it feels like to be whole yourself, to be whole when you never felt that way in your marriage, then you're so much bigger and so much greater than what you ever experienced before. I wish that I had that support when I was going through my divorce. And that's why I do this work. A divorce coach can be your greatest asset. And so can a team of professionals who understand divorce as another life cycle event that should be treated with respect, not viewed as a war designed to destroy one or both of the parties. Nobody wins in divorce, and everyone needs to remember that when there are children involved, you will always be connected, which leads me to introduce my guest today. But before we get there, you are watching and listening to the new streaming network, home of Going Solo Media and WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network Radio, podcasts, and TV. You can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Roku TV with the new streaming channel app. So, in today's episode, why building a divorce team is your best strategy, we're going to talk to my friend and colleague, Hersh Surman, an MBA, CPA, CDFA, who specializes in the financial and tax aspects of divorce. His values-based approach is to prioritize, organize, simplify your financial life during and beyond the divorce process. Hersh is committed to helping each client understand the more complex tax and financial implications. I hear a plane of his or her specific situation. As a CDFA or Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, a CPA, which is Certified Public Accountant, and a trained mediator, Hersh is uniquely equipped to recognize and creatively work through financial complexities, tax ramifications, and inequities in the settlement process that is often overlooked. Hersh is a nationally recognized expert, and he's been recognized in several forums, most recently as the recipient of the prestigious Comcast Rise Award, recognizing entrepreneurs making a positive impact on communities and their clients. Hersh, welcome to Dishing on Divorce.
I appreciate the invite, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. So first of all, wow, you have a lot of letters after your name and lots of media and lots of story. So tell us, how did you enter this field and what's your story?
Yeah, as you said earlier in your intro, when I went through my divorce, I wish there was the plethora of resources that there are today compared to even just, 7 to 10 years ago, even. So I've been a CPA 25 years or right around there. And I did the traditional, go to one of the big 4 accounting firms, go to the corporate side. And then about 12 years ago, I went through 3 major life cycles. And one of them was a divorce. And it all happened within about 22 months. So I had this massive light bulb that went off that made me realize how we don't educate our youth, our kids, not in schools, not at home, about their finances. And then couple that with a major life cycle like a divorce, that's anxiety and emotions and everything else that's involved. People are expected to make major life decisions and they're just not equipped. So along the way, over the last 12 years, I became a certified divorce financial analyst, a CDFA. I've been trained in the collaborative process. I'm a trained mediator, and really focus on the divorce world and helping them from beginning all the way beyond. And then also, obviously, very strong on the tax side, which plays both inside the divorce as things are happening, as well as afterwards if you need somebody to help you with that.
So that's amazing, because having that insight is huge to the process. One of the things that I noticed going through my own process was that nobody, not the lawyers, and since they didn't recommend me getting a financial analyst, no one asked me to look at my financial picture, asked me to think about the taxes when they were deciding on my divorce agreement. So tell us, what is a certified divorce financial analyst, and why is it so important to think about taxes as even just one element of your divorce?
So yeah, it really is very important. When you think about really everything in your life, or most things in your life, are finance dependent. Even things that seem like they are fun or a hobby or whatever it is, very often there's a finance component to it. So really, to be very general, it touches almost every part of the divorce, whether it's the general financial coaching, creating a financial strategy and financial options or packages when you go into that negotiation. Most families, especially if you have youth, are putting together financial affidavits, negotiation options, or how do you go into it. Understanding the marital home, that's often the biggest asset in a marriage, or that, and the retirement accounts, which have its own slew of things that need to be known. Putting that balance sheet together, creating a budget, because maybe you've never done that, or maybe you have to scale back on certain things. I look at tax returns. I tear apart probably 500 or 600 tax returns a year, literally, looking at all different components of it. And there's a lot of things in the way of, are assets missing, or what assets are there, or whatever it might be that come through that. That would be part of the forensic reviews. Lifestyle analysis, true ups after the fact when they've got inconsistent income because of bonus or commissions or whatever. True ups play in. I'm sure I'm missing a couple, but these are all the kind of things that a CDFA and myself would do. We don't necessarily, these are very different. We don't manage money, although that may be something you do. It's not part of the CDFA role. We don't do fraud investigation. Again, that's part of a different designation, different element, and business evaluations. Somebody or one of the parties owns a business might play in. Again, is a different designation that somebody would want to go to.
So wait a second. You mentioned a word that I don't even know if I heard of before, a true up. So what is a true up?
Okay, so most people tend to get paid a salary, right? It's very easy when you're doing child support or when you're doing maintenance, what used to be called alimony. It's very easy to kind of know what your income is if you get the same income every single 2 weeks or twice a month, whatever it might be. Very often, though, we find people have a somewhat large component of their income that might be a bonus, or they might be on a commission basis. So they kind of have, erratic or spikes in their income, or it might be seasonal because, if they're in sales in retail, obviously towards the Christmas season, or, seasonally, there's going to be differences. When the income is inconsistent like that, what they usually do is they take a base amount and they give you through the year. They'll determine what the alimony that maintenance or what the child support is. But it doesn't incorporate everything that was earned for the year. So we got to true it up, right? We got to understand what really was earned through the year. So how much would it have been if we had known that up front? How much was paid? And then is there a difference, and what is that? That's that piece, and determining that piece is called the true up.
That's amazing, because it's something that could have certainly been utilized in, a divorce. I'm very familiar with that. I never heard that term before, so that's really interesting. And getting into this business, I've learned a lot about how my divorce could have gotten resolved differently.
Right.
And in the beginning of doing this work, it was like I did a lot of this, like, oh my goodness, what did I miss? But what I've recognized is that it's not really about that. It's really about helping people who are in front of me, because
Right.
so much about coaching is like, rather than regretting what you did before, it's about looking forward and figuring out how you can move forward in strength, rather than holding on to the albatross of what mistakes you made in the past. You learn from them, but you don't keep on punishing yourself for them.
Correct.
And so I know that people, when they're dealing with their money issues, they have a tendency to get stuck in, how could I have missed that? How could I have been so stupid? Why didn't I keep track of that? Why did I, all of those questions? And
I think if I can jump in on that, I think it's so important what you're saying, because too often, especially if you're unfamiliar with finances and you're unfamiliar with divorce, you go to the traditional, and I put that in air quotes for those who are not watching the video, you go to the traditional divorce professional, which is an attorney, and your assumption, which again, you need to ask the right questions, but you don't always know what questions to ask. But your assumption is they will take care of all of it, right? They'll take care of the finances, the legal, etc. I'm not a legal person. Don't ask me the legal questions. They're not finance people. Don't ask them the finance questions. So I think sometimes going in, even, there is this misconception of the professional that you're hiring to be your negotiator or the forefront of your interaction with the opposing counsel. Sometimes we ascribe more to them than they are. And I'm not putting them down in any way. I think attorneys are completely vital to the divorce process. There are tremendous amounts of errors that would be made without their guidance. And I think if you've got a good negotiator and somebody who's experienced, they can also help you get very creative. But again, using the right professional for the right task is very, very important.
Right. And so that's something that you and I spoke about before we jumped on this call, is this idea of building a support team.
Correct.
And how it can seem counterintuitive, and yet it really is something that we sort of need to train people going through the process, that this is the way to save you money.
Right.
So tell me more about that.
So I'm going to kind of throw out this is a made up scenario, but I mean, to put it in perspective a little bit, I think the first one is, imagine going to your attorney, right, who is an attorney, legal, and saying, hey, I'd like you to help me create a financial strategy for going through this divorce and after. And are they going to be able to do that? Are they going to explore your priorities and your values? Are they going to explore your current resources? Are you going to explore your earnings potential? Are they going to break down your, your balance sheet, the marital balance sheet, to the degree that it needs to be done? These are all things. So just putting it in perspective, asking that kind of a question can kind of tell you, oh, maybe I need people. And, as I said, adding people to the team can lower your fees. It can get you a better outcome. I think those are two very important things for everybody. And really, I recommend people to have two teams. One is your emotional support team, meaning your friends, a therapist, support groups, things like that. And with that comes, for me anyway, one rule. It cannot just be anyone who's been divorced, because too often they're still bitter about what happened. It's got to be somebody who's positive, somebody who can be a little bit objective sometimes, which is hard for family and friends. But those kind of people that are going to help you in a positive way move through it, not in a way, as you said, you don't want to dwell on what's happened or the misgivings of what happened. You want the people who are going to emotionally pick you up and help you. So that's team number one. The one I think we're going to focus on, obviously, is your professional team. You, as an individual going through a divorce, are multidimensional, right? You have legal process that you're going through. You have financial needs. You have emotional needs. You have needs for your children. You might have real estate needs because you have to buy a home or sell a home. The mortgage plays in. All of these factors cannot be done by one person. Mm-hmm. So bringing the right people in, having that team, being able to coordinate appropriately. And sometimes we speak to each other. I mean, I've spoken to many professionals, and I was on a call earlier today with an attorney. I am feeding him all the questions that need to be asked when he deposes, the person, because I've scoured the tax returns and all that. Again, if you don't have that team, the attorney's not going to have all the questions needed. So I think having an understanding of who you are, what your needs are, that's the priorities between prioritize, organize, simplify in my process, but really understanding your needs, and then who do you need to help you get the most of that becomes ultimately putting your team together.
Yeah, you're right. You're right on the mark with that. And with that in mind, we're going to take a little break, and then we'll go back and pick up our conversation from there.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Great. And we're back. Welcome back, Hersh Surman, our CDFA, CPA, MBA, everything A. Welcome back to Dishing on Divorce. When we left, we were talking about needing a financial, actually a support team when we're going through divorce. And one of the things I've learned in my work as a divorce coach is that there are actually 4 divorces that people go through. There's the legal divorce, where you need your lawyer. There's the emotional divorce that we've talked about, where you have your friends, you have your family, you have your therapist, you have your divorce coach. There's your financial divorce, where you have your CDFA, your accountant, your tax person, which can all be one person. Right. In some circumstances, but you might have a mortgage person, you might have a realtor. There's a lot of people that are part of that story. And you have your social divorce, where all of a sudden you've been in a world as a couple and now you're a single. So that's a whole other experience. And again, that might be therapist and divorce coach. And you're launching into a new world where maybe you're going to start working and you haven't before. So there's other people out there to help you with that process. So when you think about all of that, that can be very daunting. And one of the biggest issues when you're faced with divorce is fear. So I wanted to talk to you, Hersh, about how does fear come into play with the finances?
So I think fear is one of those big issues I was speaking about earlier. When you're going through a divorce and you're anxious and you're stressed, fear is a big part of that. The scarcity, am I going to have enough? If you were not the spouse that was dealing with the finances, you may not even know what kind of finances are out there. So how would I even know if I have enough? Because I don't even know what's out there, right? I mean, I think, again, it comes back to knowing who you are in many ways. So I'll give you one example. I had a client, I'm going back probably 3 or 4 years already now. Client says to me, Hersh, I'm going to get about $1.8 million coming out of our divorce. That should be okay, right? And I said to her, I don't know. And she looks at me like, you're a finance guy. What do you mean you don't know, right? And I said, well, how much are you going to spend? Are you going to spend $100,000 a year? That's 18 years without interest. Are you going to spend $500,000 a year? Because that's not even 3.5 years left, right? So it depends a lot on your resources, but it also depends a lot on you being able to create a budget. I actually developed something, I call it a divorce budget. I think it helps you in multiple ways in your negotiating. It helps you in understanding your life going forward. But when I build a budget, I don't do the traditional what comes in, what goes out. I build it with, let's look at your essential spend only. What is the absolute minimum? That's your car, your food, your home. Get through the month. Then let's fully load your life. Well, I'm a member at 3 gyms. I, am part of this club. I'm part of that. Go to the movies every week. I meet my girlfriends 3 times a week for dinner. Let's fully load that. And now when you're negotiating, you got a starting point and an end point. You obviously want to come in somewhere in between. Mm-hmm. But if you prioritize all of this and you know what it is and you have a sense of what's going to be coming your way, you can alleviate a tremendous amount of your fear, because you may not have a gap, or you may have a very small gap that you can work with a professional like myself or whomever to close the gap pretty easily or pretty quickly. I always want to also help people be realistic. I know that you do a lot of this as well. Somebody wants 90% of the marital assets. It's probably not going to happen. There are 13 or 14 states that are community property states. That's a 50-50, like basically automatically. Yeah. You've already ruled that out. So being realistic is important. Are you going to have to scale back on certain things? Probably. Now you figure out what are the things that are really going to bring you joy, and those are the ones you want to focus on, cutting out or minimizing your spend on the things that don't bring you much joy. But again, that can alleviate that fear, but it comes with knowledge and education and knowing who you are and your situation.
Yeah, and that's huge, because people are afraid to even get that knowledge and information.
Right.
One of the biggest fears I see here in New Jersey with my clients is what's called the CIS, the Case Information Statement, which is one of the first documents you have to fill out, and it's your marital budget, and it line items by month what you're spending in dozens of categories. But really, it's about getting the information you need to see what you're actually spending.
Right.
It's terrifying, but it's also empowering, because once you see what you're spending, then you know something. And when you know something, you have power. And so it's like people have a block, because on the one hand, they like living in their ignorance.
Yes.
It seems safe because they don't have to know. But once they're in this moment of life where they're getting a divorce, now they're forced to know. So now they have to face some real issues, and it's scary.
It can be very scary. I think, as you said, it can be extremely empowering. We often, I'll give you an example of myself. I was married 20 years, right? I lost who I was. I didn't really know who I was anymore. This can also help you kind of do a reset. You get into a marriage and you want to make your partner happy. And so sometimes you're doing things you don't even necessarily want to do. I had a client that said to me, Hirsch, he loved to go camping like every month. And we used to spend a fortune on it. I'm not a camper. I'm a glamper. That's what she said to me. And then I'm not really even a glamper. I didn't like that at all. But again, these are the kind of things that it didn't bring you that much joy. You don't need to do it. What does bring you joy? Let's focus on that. So it can be incredibly empowering, and it can truly, in many ways, kind of improve your life going through this, because if it's a contentious environment that you're in, it's not a healthy environment, you can create a new environment and create a whole new perspective. I think I've shared with you a while ago already, the first blog I ever wrote, I originally called Divorce is Awesome, right? It was after my divorce. And I renamed that to Perspective is Everything. But I ran through all these kind of like changes. I thought that my life had died this excruciating death. But when I came to the realization of all the amazing things I can now reintroduce or create in my life, I realize this really is an opportunity that you can have an amazing life going forward. But it's up to you. I mean, that's the key. You've got to do the work, and you've got to do a little self-reflection. That's not an easy thing, especially coming through something that's difficult.
Right. And I think the key word here is that it's work, and you've got to do the work.
Correct.
And
Yes.
when we're stuck, it's hard to get unstuck, because as we both know, you have to go through it. And the hardest thing is to go through, and avoidance is what many of our clients are stuck in. And so avoiding doing the case information statement, or avoiding looking at your budget, or avoiding having the hard conversation, not just with your soon-to-be ex-spouse, but with yourself. Yeah. Like, what is it that I really need? What is it that I really want? What is it that I really want for my children? Like, these are the big, hard questions. And so getting a team involved, you'll have more people asking you questions that you've been afraid to ask yourself. But when someone else is verbalizing those questions, it makes it a little bit easier for you to hear them.
Right. It's very true. And I think it helps you in multiple ways. You almost call it like, the mom effect. Your mom can say something to you 100 times, and somebody else says it, and they're a genius. Right. But I think the objectivity is a very important piece of that. And we've spoken a little bit about emotions, and emotions truly can be the most expensive part of your divorce if you're not careful. On a lot of areas, you can spend money trying to get your pound of flesh, or proving I'm right, which really you never get the emotional satisfaction from that. But the other piece to it is emotions can, if you don't step back and say, who do I want to be, or who am I, and where do I want to go, you can make decisions going through your divorce that are completely not aligned, in disparity with who you ultimately want to be. And that becomes quite costly financially, and I think often quite costly emotionally as well.
Yeah, because you're carrying that pain with you for many years into the future.
Right.
And what you're saying is really one of the tragedies of divorce, is that when we're convinced that we're right, or that we must get emotional justice, and then we push ourselves that the judge will get us emotional justice, which we both know never happens, that the judge isn't there for emotional justice. You're stuck in this place that I have to prove I'm right. I have to prove I'm right. And then motion after motion and money after money, you're not going to get that proof. And if you can let go of some of this emotional projection and insistence, and say, okay, what do I need here? What needs to happen? And what am I actually fighting against or fighting for? These are hard questions.
They are. And this, I've come up with this, my new favorite saying, if I can call it that. So many people think when it comes to this, they're going to get their day in court to explain it all. And you're lucky if you get an hour in court, not a day. You're going to get an hour at most, kind of thing. And judges come with biases, and judges are not finance people, and they're not therapists, and they're not emotional people. They're legal people. Yeah. And so what you think you might be getting out of it is really not what their expertise and what their goal is in this. Their goal is to come to a decision, and that's it. And they are much less emotionally invested in your divorce than you are, clearly. And so sometimes they're going to take the easy way out. I see in finances, somebody says I should be getting 100,000. Somebody says I should be getting 2. Other party says, no, you should only be getting 50. The judge says, okay, we'll give you 75. Yeah. There's not necessarily rhyme or reason outside of that was straight down the middle. It's easier. So people have to be very, very careful. And this is, again, where I think your team can really build the right expectations and guide you appropriately as to, yes, if you go to court, that might happen, but the other times they're going to be like, boy, if you go to court, you are so off base on what you think you're going to get.
Yeah.
They're going to say it nicer than that, I hope. But again, you get the message, right? It's the real going through this with a goal and realistically all the way through, I think are two very important things that your team brings to you as you go through the process.
And I think there's something that you raised a little bit earlier when you talk about your values and your vision and your own personal integrity as you go through the process. Who do you want to be in this divorce?
Right.
And how do you want to be seen when you're going forward? Like, how can you return to your values again and again? If you have a team that is reminding you, well, when we spoke in the beginning, this is what you said you wanted to be. Do you feel right at this moment you're living in those values? And if the client says, not exactly, so then you can say, well, what can we do to help you stay in your integrity?
I have often, so I have an exercise I run through people on their priorities and their values. And then I say to them, do me a favor, let's pretend you your spouse. Let's do it again. And there's a lot of benefit because often people don't even know what their priorities are. And I can understand that. I mean, it's as an individual versus a couple, they're going to change. And so I understand if you've been a couple for 20 years, 30 years, things are going to change. And we got to kind of reevaluate what is important now going forward. So that's important. It also helps you understand ways to negotiate better because you know what the other party is thinking. But those values also help you in a lot of other ways as you go through, because those are your guiding lights, your beacon out there in the storm, right? Because if something comes up and now all of a sudden the other party's getting rattled, you can go, that doesn't fit what I need. And you don't need to run down that rabbit hole. You know, you can let it go, or you can use it to be able to negotiate a better outcome for the things that are part of your priorities and your values. And so really having those priorities help your team help you, but they also help yourself in getting through this process with less stress, more focus, which is not easy going through a divorce.
Yeah.
And that is a wonderful way to go through a difficult process.
Absolutely. I was reading a book yesterday, and it talked about integrity actually meaning wholeness and completeness. So when we're in our integrity, we're actually in our completeness.
Interesting.
So if we feel that we're misaligned and not in our integrity, it's because something isn't complete. Something is not aligned. And so by having that target, that value, that gives us a way to be in alignment.
Right.
And also it gives us more confidence during the negotiations. Like if you've been in a relationship where you're always afraid that he or she is the more powerful arguer, he or she has power over, this can be a way for you to regain your own voice and feel like you are aligned in your own power. So it's not a power over. And having the team to hold you up gives you a little bit more power and confidence in the back.
100%. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I am 100% behind this idea. And, the finances are so hard for people to get a handle of. Even people in finance don't necessarily have a handle on their finances.
I agree 100%. I do.
Yeah. The shoemaker doesn't have shoes. So it's so important. And people feel like they don't want to look at the man behind the curtain, right? Because that person is just a person. Right. And so if you've been in a relationship and one party thinks they are the master of the universe, they can't let that image go. And so if you're the other party, you need to own your own power. And that makes a very different conversation when you're going into negotiations.
It is. I also would say the skills it builds and the confidence it builds is very, very important. It's so much better to do it 6 months before you get divorced than now I'm divorced. Now I've got to figure it all out, whether it's your budget, whether it's how to make financial
Ah,
decisions, whether it's how to evaluate options, whatever it is, those skills, the sooner you get them, the better it is,
mm.
because you don't want to be divorced and now all of a sudden you've got to start floundering to figure out what's going on, because that can be very detrimental to your self-esteem. It can ruin your credit. There's a lot of things that come through.
Yeah. So what you're suggesting, what you're sort of holding up as the sort of the banner is the support at the beginning, the support during
Right.
helps you own the support after. Because
Correct.
when you move into the next phase of your life, when you now have the opportunity to identify how you can be more whole and greater than you were before, gives you the opportunity to have this next best life.
Right.
You know, you may feel like you've wasted, but rather than sitting in that I wasted all those years, you can be sitting in I have this great opportunity in front of me. And it's a long way from there to here. Like,
Yes.
it's not
and
a
it's
snap.
not linear.
It's not linear. It's not linear, and there's a lot of crashing in the middle, but
Yes.
each time the crash is a little lighter. So, you know, I would never say that it's easy, because it's not, and it takes years, but the years are years of learning. And you don't lose the relationships. That's the
Right.
other thing. Each relationship you build is a relationship that you're going to have for the long term.
And I would say, some of the most rewarding words for me from a client is, or scenarios, is when they come out and they've literally never paid a bill, or they have no idea what their marital balance sheet looks like, or what is the value of a dollar sometimes, because they've never worked, right? They've been a stay-at-home parent, whatever it is. And by the end of it, they're balancing, they've got a balanced budget, they're living by their budget, they're paying their bills, they excited about where life is going, the power that they have behind being in control, which they never felt before. These are some of the most amazing things to see as a transformation in somebody that you work with. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you all of a sudden see light
Yeah.
when you met the person, and they were just sort of like crunched up. Like, you could see a person who feels very crunched up, and then they're open and they're full of light.
Right.
It's really exciting.
And I've worked with people all over the country, and I think it was Tuesday of last week, about a week ago, I was speaking to a client who I helped through the divorce. She's now looking to start a consulting business. She's very, very, very competent in her field. She doesn't want to go back to corporate America because she's got kids at home, things like that. And literally within about 30 seconds, over Zoom, right? I mean, she was 3,000 miles away, literally the other side of the country. And I could tell the energy in her and the confidence in her. And I mentioned it to her. And she was like so grateful, but it was amazing to see it. And that was through Zoom.
Yeah.
In person, it's probably, twice the energy level. But
Yeah.
it's great. And it's doable. I mean, that's really what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
many people come through this with almost fatalistic approach because they don't know where to start. Again, start with getting your team in place, I think.
Yeah.
But it definitely helps, and you can grow tremendously more than you ever thought you could.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate having you here today. You are great at what you do, and I feel lighter myself having this conversation. So thank you. How can people find you?
The best way is to go to my website, lifecycle.financial. There's no .com, .net, just lifecycle.financial.
Great, great. And we see you, it says your phone number, Hersh at lifecycle.financial. That is awesome. You can find me at lzlcoaching.com or email me, Lisa at lzlcoaching.com. Today, you are watching us and listening to the new streaming network, home of Going Solo Media and WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network Radio, Podcasts, and TV. And you can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Roku with the new streaming channel app. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you.